What happens when the man who signs your paycheck shows up in your kitchen, wearing an apron and asking how to refill the coffee pot? Xavier Jenson had inherited the diner chain from his father 6 years ago. 14 locations across 3 states. His dad built it with grit and long nights, flipping burgers and scrubbing grease traps. But Xavier? He'd never worked a single shift on the floor. He ran the place from clean offices, boardrooms, and spreadsheets. His world was contracts and quarterly reports. Until the reviews came in. 3 one-star reviews in a week. All from the same location, the Brookdale Diner on 5th and Main. Cold food. Rude service. A waitress who ignored customers. And one review that stuck with him. The cook looked exhausted and still made my eggs perfect. Give that man a raise. Xavier called the district manager, Ben Connors, and got the usual corporate dodge. They're just short-staffed right now, Ben had said. People call out, you know how it is. No, Xavier said flatly. I don't. That's why I'm going to see for myself. Xavier didn't want them to roll out a red carpet. So, he made a call to HR under a fake name, Jason, and got himself on board as a new trainee waiter. He used a different ID, a fake resume, and had a friend in HR help the paperwork slide through. Thanks to turnover, most of the team at Brookdale had never met the upper management, let alone the owner. It was a corporate chain, and faces changed fast. He grew out his beard, dyed it darker, wore thick-rimmed glasses, and spoke just a little slower than usual. The kind of guy who got overlooked in a crowd. When he showed up on Monday at 6:45 a.m., the manager, Carla, barely looked up from her phone. You're the new guy? Jason, right? She asked, chewing gum and scrolling. Aprons are in the back. Grab one and shadow Haley. Haley Winters was already wiping down tables and setting silverware. Late 20s, tired eyes, but she smiled when she saw him. New guy? She asked. Yeah. Jason. Cool. You ever waited tables? Nope, Xavier said honestly. She laughed. Then you're in for a ride. The morning shift was chaotic. Carla stayed in the back office most of the time, yelling out orders only when something went wrong. Haley picked up the slack, covering 3 sections while training him. She was patient, even when he messed up the register twice and dropped a glass of orange juice. You'll get the hang of it, she said, handing him a towel. Xavier noticed something else though. The kitchen. Every time he stepped near the pickup window, he heard the same calm, deep voice calling out orders with military precision. 2 over easy, 1 scrambled. Pancakes up in 90 seconds. He finally saw him around 9 a.m. The cook. A tall, broad-shouldered man with dark skin, short graying hair under a sweat-stained cap, and a quiet intensity in his eyes. He moved like someone who didn't waste motion. Order up, the cook said, sliding 2 plates onto the warmer. Thanks, Xavier said, grabbing the plates. The man nodded but didn't speak. His name tag read, Marlon. It wasn't until noon, during the lull, that Xavier got a moment by the sink with Haley. Does Marlon always work mornings? He asked. Every morning, she said, wiping her forehead. He opens at 5. Sometimes closes, too. Long shifts. Yeah, and get this, he works nights at the hospital. Janitorial. He sleeps like 3 hours a day. Xavier blinked. Wait, seriously? She nodded. Single dad. His kid's in middle school. Marlon's been here for 10 years. Never complains. That hit Xavier harder than he expected. He watched Marlon the rest of the day. The man barely paused. He handled complaints with grace, helped the dishwasher when they fell behind, and even fixed the fryer when it jammed. Meanwhile, Carla stayed glued to her phone, only showing up to yell when fries were late or a customer asked for a manager. She berated a new server for giving a free refill, then walked out back to smoke. By 3 p.m., they were down a server, and Haley was stretched too thin. Xavier offered to cover a table. Haley blinked in surprise. You sure? Yeah. He took the order, brought the food, and despite mixing up the drinks got a smile out of the elderly couple at the booth. It felt good. Real. At the end of the shift, Xavier hung up his apron and walked out with Haley and Marlon. The sun was already setting. Marlon was quiet but nodded at Xavier. Good first day, he said. Thanks, Xavier replied. How do you do it? 2 jobs? Marlon shrugged. You do what you gotta do, Haley added. His kid wants to go to college. He's saving every penny. Xavier didn't say anything. Just nodded and walked to his car, heart heavy. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, looking at payroll records. Marlon hadn't had a raise in 4 years. Carla had gotten 2 bonuses for retention, despite the location having the highest turnover in the region. Xavier felt sick. He'd built walls between himself and these people. Numbers on spreadsheets. Names in reports. But today, he'd seen more in 1 shift than in 6 years as CEO. Tomorrow, he'd be back at Brookdale. And he'd be watching everything. The second morning came earlier than Xavier expected. He'd gone to bed late, but still found himself outside the Brookdale diner at 5:45 a.m., watching steam rise off the vents above the kitchen. Inside, the lights were already on. Marlon was in again. That wasn't a surprise. What did catch Xavier off guard was the delivery truck parked at an angle by the loading zone. The driver was pacing near the back, arms flailing as he spoke to someone on the phone. Xavier walked past without staring, but when he entered through the employee door in back, he could hear the tail end of Marlon's voice. I understand, but if it's half the order again, that's 2 days in a row. We've got a full breakfast crowd coming. Xavier ducked into the changing area and slipped on the same apron from yesterday. As he stepped into the kitchen, he caught Marlon setting down a clipboard near the dry storage rack. None of the other staff had arrived yet. Morning, Xavier offered. Marlon gave a tired nod, then pointed with his chin toward the walk-in cooler. Eggs didn't come. Again. I've got maybe 2 trays left. No sausage either. Do we tell Carla? I did. She said to make do. Marlon didn't look up as he said it. He was already pulling a half-used bag of hash browns from the freezer. Xavier glanced at the prep list on the wall. There was no way they'd get through a full breakfast shift without those supplies. But Marlon didn't slow down. He chopped onions, rechecked the pancake batter, and adjusted the griddle temperature like he'd already accepted things would go wrong and planned for it. By 6:30, Haley arrived, hair still damp from a rush shower. She gave Xavier a quick wave while tying her apron. I had to drop my sister off at school. Sorry if I'm late. You're good, Xavier said. Marlon's been here a while already. Haley glanced at the clock, then toward the kitchen. He always is. The first customers filtered in by 7, construction workers, early commuters, a couple of retirees grabbing their usual booth by the window. Carla hadn't shown up yet. Haley ran the front mostly solo, and Xavier followed her lead, jotting down orders and learning how to pace the coffee rounds. At one point, a middle-aged man in a blue vest waved Xavier over. He looked irritated. I asked for sausage. She said you're out? Xavier hesitated. We didn't get our full delivery this morning. I'm sorry. The man sighed. You guys have been slipping. Last week my eggs were cold. Now this? I'll talk to the kitchen. Xavier said, then added, Can I comp you a side of pancakes instead? The man gave a grudging nod. Fine. But tell your manager this place used to be better. By 9, the line was out the door. Carla still hadn't arrived. Marlon moved between line cook and short order chef seamlessly, but it was clear he was stretched thin. He paused only once to roll his shoulder, and winced slightly. You okay? Xavier asked as he passed by. Stiff from last night's shift. Nothing new. Haley leaned in a few minutes later while pulling extra menus from the hostess stand. She didn't schedule a second cook again. Said it wasn't budget efficient. Xavier blinked. So Marlon's alone back there? Yep. Happens most Tuesdays. The orders kept coming. At one point, the printer jammed. Marlon didn't yell, didn't panic. He just cleared it, rewrote 2 tickets by hand, and kept going. But there was a moment, just a few seconds, when he leaned against the prep counter and closed his eyes. Xavier watched it from across the kitchen, a plate of toast in his hand. It wasn't dramatic. Just a man standing still, trying to hold the day together. By noon, Carla finally walked in, sunglasses on, holding an energy drink. She didn't acknowledge anyone as she passed through the dining area, heading straight for the office. A minute later, she called out, voice sharp. Who authorized those comp pancakes this morning? Xavier froze. Haley glanced at him. Then she walked into the back. That was me, she said, her tone calm but firm. He was upset, and we were out of sausage. Carla's voice rose. You don't get to make those calls. We're already tight on margins. You think pancakes are free? Xavier followed, standing just outside the office doorway. I told her to do it, he said, stepping forward. Carla looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. You're the new guy. Jason? Yeah. Well, Jason, next time check with me first. We don't give away food unless I say so. Xavier nodded slowly. Got it. As they turned to leave the office, Carla added under her breath. New hires thinking they run the place already. In the kitchen, Marlon was still at the grill. Xavier walked back and just stood near him for a beat. Do you ever get help back here? Marlon flipped a set of French toast slices. Sometimes. Depends who shows up. But I can cover most of it. But at what cost? Marlon didn't answer that. He just moved to the fryer, dropped a basket of fries, and adjusted the timer. After the lunch rush died down, Xavier offered to help with dishes. The dishwasher, a soft-spoken teenager named Louise, had been struggling to keep up. Xavier hadn't noticed it before, but the kid's left hand was wrapped in gauze. You all right? Xavier asked as he rinsed plates. Louise shrugged. Burned it last night. Still swollen. Why didn't you call out? Did, Carla told me it was just steam and to come in anyway. Xavier stared at him. Did she even ask how bad it was? Louise shook his head. Later, while drying his hands, Xavier pulled Haley aside again. Has anyone ever reported her? Carla? To who? Haley asked. Ben? He doesn't care. As long as the numbers are fine, she stays. Xavier thought for a second. What about HR? Same story. We lost 3 servers this month. One of them tried to escalate. Never heard back. Xavier felt the weight of it settle in his chest. This wasn't just a bad manager. This was a system that had allowed her to stay in place because no one looked closely enough. He stayed until close, helping wipe down booths and restock condiments. Marlon finally clocked out at 9:30, his shirt soaked through. As he stepped out the back door, he paused. You don't ask many dumb questions, he said to Xavier. That's rare. Xavier smiled. I'm learning. Marlon gave a small nod, then walked off into the night, heading toward the bus stop across the street. He didn't wait around. Didn't linger. Just kept moving. Xavier stood there for a long time after. The next morning, he'd be back again. But not as Jason. He had seen enough. Xavier arrived at the Brookdale location just before noon, this time in his usual clothes, dark slacks, collared shirt, no apron. He parked across the street and waited in his car for a few minutes, watching the front door. The lunch rush was already underway, and through the front window he could see Haley moving quickly from table to table. Marlon's figure was visible at the grill, shoulders squared, posture tight. He walked in without hesitation. The moment he stepped through the door, Haley looked up from the register and did a double take. Her eyes flicked to his face, then down to the absence of his apron, then back up again. She froze. The receipt she was holding crumpled slightly in her hand. Carla wasn't at the host stand. She was seated at a booth near the back, sipping from a to-go cup and typing on her phone. She didn't look up. Xavier waited near the counter until Haley approached. "Jason?" she asked, voice low. "Not exactly," he replied. "My name's Xavier Jenson." She blinked. "Wait. Yes." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She stood there, stunned, until Carla finally looked up and noticed him. "You're not supposed to be out of uniform," Carla called out, standing. "This is a health code." Xavier turned toward her. "We need to talk. In the office. Now." Carla hesitated, clearly trying to read the situation. Her usual swagger faltered. She glanced at Haley, then back at Xavier, and finally walked toward the back hallway without another word. The office was cramped, lit by a single flickering fluorescent bulb. A stack of outdated menus sat on the filing cabinet, and an untouched training manual was shoved into the corner behind the monitor. Xavier closed the door behind them. "I'm the owner," he said. Carla's jaw tightened. "You can't just walk in here pretending to be. I've worked alongside your staff for the past 2 days. I've watched what you do. What you don't do. I've seen how deliveries get mishandled, how you leave one person to run an entire kitchen, how a dishwasher with a burn is told to show up anyway. I've seen enough." Carla crossed her arms. "If this is about that comp breakfast, it's about everything," he cut in. "You've been ignoring staffing needs, refusing to escalate supply issues, and from what I've gathered, you've created an environment where people are afraid to speak up." "That ends today," she scoffed. "You think you can just come in and judge how I run things after 2 shifts? I didn't judge. I observed. And I listened. Which is more than you've done in months." There was a long pause. Xavier stepped back and opened the door. "You're done here." Carla's face flushed. "You're firing me?" "Yes. Effective immediately. You can collect your final paycheck from HR. I've already notified them." He didn't wait for her reply. He walked out of the office and into the kitchen. Marlon was plating an omelet. He didn't look up until Xavier stopped at the counter. "I know you don't have time for small talk," Xavier said. "But I need a few minutes of your time after the lunch rush." Marlon blinked once, then nodded. "I'll finish this run and meet you in back." Xavier stepped into the dining room and motioned for Haley to join him near the register. "I let Carla go," he said quietly. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. "I'll be taking over as acting manager here until we transition. I need someone I can trust to help keep things running while we fix the gaps. That someone is you." She stared at him. "You're serious?" "I am. I've seen how you work. You keep this place standing. I want to bring in more help, restructure scheduling, and fix the supply chain issues, but in the meantime, I need you to help guide the team." "I'm not a manager," she said, her voice unsteady. "You are now. We'll talk about pay later today, and I'll walk you through everything." She looked around the room, then back at him. "Okay. Yeah. I'll try." "No," Xavier said. "You don't need to try. Just keep doing what you've already been doing." By 2:30, the rush had slowed. Marlon came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He followed Xavier to the side hallway where a small break table sat against the wall. Once they were seated, Xavier spoke first. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Not just for what's been happening here, but for not knowing about it. I let people like Carla operate unchecked. That's my failure." Marlon didn't say anything at first. His hands were resting on the table, fingers slightly curled. "I've been doing this a long time," he finally said. "I don't expect thanks. I just try to keep the line moving." "You shouldn't have to do it alone," Xavier replied. "I've read your file. You haven't had a raise in 4 years. That changes today." Marlon looked up, his expression unreadable. I'm increasing your hourly rate by 25%. Retroactive to the start of this pay period. You'll also have a second cook on every morning shift moving forward. And if you're willing, I'd like to create a kitchen lead role for you, higher pay, more input on scheduling and inventory. Marlon leaned back slightly, the muscles in his jaw shifting as he processed. I'm not much for titles, he said. You won't need to be, Xavier replied. You'd be helping train new cooks, but mostly I want to make sure your experience shapes our standards. Marlon folded his arms. And if I say no? Then nothing changes about your job. But either way, the pay increase stays. For the first time since Xavier had met him, Marlon smiled. It was small. Subtle. But it was real. I'll think about it, he said. You've earned that and more. After Marlon returned to the kitchen, Xavier sat down at the break table for a moment. He pulled out his phone and started drafting a message to corporate HR. He listed out every concern he'd witnessed, every policy failure, and every name of the team members who were holding things together without recognition. Then he stood, rolled up his sleeves, and stepped back into the dining room. By late afternoon, word had started to spread among the staff. Luis approached him quietly near the soda fountain, still favoring his left hand. You really own this place? He asked. I do. Luis nodded slowly. Are things really gonna be different? They already are, Xavier said. That evening, before the dinner rush hit, a delivery truck pulled into the back alley and unloaded the missing inventory from the previous 2 days. Eggs, sausage, even backup pancake mix. Haley was restocking the cooler with another server when she looked at Xavier. Did you call corporate? I called someone higher, he said. As the sun dipped below the rooftop, casting long shadows through the kitchen window, the Brookdale diner finally began to feel like it was turning a corner. Not because of a policy. Not because of a memo. But because the person at the top had finally stepped inside and listened. Xavier didn't pull back once the dust settled. He returned to Brookdale every morning that week, no longer undercover, but not above the work either. He brewed coffee when the morning rush hit hard, helped restock dry goods in the lull between shifts, and made sure he was within earshot of every staff conversation, not to monitor but to learn. He had scheduled daily check-ins with Haley, now interim floor lead, to understand where things still buckled. They met in the cramped back hallway near the mop's sink. No conference rooms, no leather chairs. Just a clipboard, 2 coffees, and a few minutes before the next wave of orders. We're still short on weekend coverage, she said, scanning the schedule. Luis has class on Saturdays now, and Trina's cousin who was supposed to start never showed. Xavier nodded. I'll post the opening again today. But we may need to rotate some weekday people into Saturday until we can fill it. I can cover next Saturday, she said. You've already picked up 2 doubles this week. I'll be fine. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I'm not looking to burn out the people I trust the most. We'll find coverage. Just not at your expense. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. All right. I'll rearrange the floor charts so no one's doubling up on sections like we used to. That afternoon, he rode with the next delivery truck. Not because he didn't trust the shipment, he wanted to speak directly to the driver. 2 missed deliveries in 1 week had exposed more than just a paperwork error. The driver, a wiry man in his 40s named Marco, confirmed the root of the issue as they unloaded cases of produce. The route got changed last month, Marco explained. They rerouted us to prioritize the newer locations. Brookdale ended up last on the line. Xavier crouched to grab a crate of lettuce. Even though this one's older, it pulls more weekday traffic than some of the suburban stores. I know. Doesn't make sense to me either. But dispatch said it came from above. Not anymore, Xavier said. I'll get it corrected. It wasn't just about food deliveries or scheduling gaps. It was about trust, earning it, not demanding it. And for that to happen, Xavier knew he couldn't vanish after the headline moment passed. By Thursday, Carla's absence was being felt, but not in the way she might have expected. The tension that used to hang in the kitchen was gone. There were fewer sharp exchanges, no unexplained schedule changes, and no one hovering behind the counter watching for mistakes. Still, it wasn't perfect. The staff was tired, the gaps were real, and no one was pretending otherwise. On Friday afternoon, Marlon agreed to meet Xavier in the back lot after his shift. The cook's shirt was streaked with grease, and there were faint lines under his eyes, but he moved with a steadier rhythm than earlier in the week. He leaned against the back wall, sipping from a water bottle as Xavier joined him. "You don't have to keep checking in on me," Marlon said without any edge in his voice. "It's not just you," Xavier replied. "I'm checking in on the people who hold this place together. You just happen to be one of them." Marlon exhaled slowly. "I took that kitchen lead role. I saw. HR sent the paperwork through. I don't care much for titles," he added, pausing. "But I've started using the calendar board. Wrote out prep workflows for the weekend team. That'll help the new guy starting Monday. He's coming from the Westfield store. Good experience, just needs to learn our rhythm." Marlon nodded. "He'll learn." They stood in silence for a few seconds, the hum of the walk-in cooler fan behind them. "My son's been asking questions," Marlon said, glancing down at the bottle cap in his hands. "Noticed I've been home before 9 this week. I hope that's a good thing." "It is." He asked if I'd be able to come to his school concert next month. Xavier didn't interrupt. I told him yeah. I think I actually meant it this time. Inside, the dinner shift was starting. Haley was at the host stand, and 2 part-time hires from the downtown location had agreed to pick up weekend hours until Brookdale could stabilize the roster. It wasn't a fix, but it was a patch. And for now, that was enough. Later that night, after the last customer left and the booths were wiped down, Xavier gathered the team in the dining room. Not for a speech, just a conversation. "I know this week's been heavier than usual," he said. "But I want to be clear, we're not chasing perfection. We're chasing consistency. Systems that work. Schedules that respect your time. And a team that doesn't feel like it's held together by duct tape." Luis leaned against the counter near the soda machine. "You mean, like, people actually showing up on their shifts?" "That's part of it," Xavier said, smiling faintly. "But it's also about giving you enough support to do your jobs without burning out. Haley's helping us redesign the floor coverage this month. Marlon's setting up prep standardization. And I'll be back twice a week, minimum, until everything's running smooth." One of the newer servers, a college student named Priya, spoke up from the side. "Are you doing this at every store?" "Eventually. But I started here for a reason." Haley glanced at him, then back to the team. "He saw what we were dealing with. And he didn't pretend it was normal." Xavier nodded. "I won't pretend again." When the lights dimmed and the doors were locked, Xavier stayed behind to help clean the soda nozzles. It wasn't his job. That wasn't the point. 2 weeks later, Brookdale's customer reviews had shifted. The complaints had stopped. A regular left a handwritten note on a receipt that read, "New vibe. Staff looks less stressed. Food's even better." Xavier didn't print it out. He didn't frame it. He just folded it once and kept it in his wallet. Not as a trophy. As a reminder. He knew the work wasn't finished. One good week didn't erase months of imbalance. But the difference now was clear. He was in it. Not from a boardroom, not from a call sheet, but from the floor. And he had no plans to leave it behind.